Good morning. Welcome to the special emergency meeting of the Champaign City Council for March 13th, 2020. I invite you to join me for a moment of silence followed by the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Kyles?
Here.
Pianfetti?
Here.
Stock?
Here.
Beck?
Here.
Briggs?
Here.
Bruno?
Here.
Foreman?
Present.
Gladney?
Present.
Mayor Finan.
Here. Please call the first council bill.
Council Bill number 2020-22, an ordinance related to the emergency created by the impact of the COVID-19 virus.
We have a motion and a second. I'm going to ask the city attorney if he has any comments.
Thank you, Mayor. I do. What I hope to do is give a general overview, then go over the ordinance and its specifics. So I realize that this is ordinance has just been recently distributed to the council and certainly made public. So I'll try to go in as much detail as I can. So I'll start. After the mayor issued her emergency declaration on Thursday, March 12th, and the agenda was published for the emergency meeting of the City Council, there have been several inquiries with respect to the practical effect of the ordinance. Much as the governor's proclamation formalized the recognition of the serious health situation that's been widely discussed connected with COVID-19, so the mayor's emergency proclamation recognizes the existence and anticipates the possible serious consequences of COVID-19 illness locally. The goal of the emergency declaration and the ordinance related is to prepare in the eventuality that further action may be necessary to be taken. Neither the declaration of the emergency or this ordinance that's before the City Council compel any direct action by the city at this point in time. Compel. What the ordinance does do is permit certain flexibility in meetings, personnel policies, payment of bills, dealing with city licenses and permits, and managing city facilities in the event these matters require more immediate action. I'll review the entire ordinance after I've finished the statement. There is in existence and has been for a long time, over almost 15 years, emergency powers that the mayor can exercise in the event of an immediate emergency. All these issues that are in the ordinance and in our city code, they've been in the city code for a long time. Many of the powers are geared toward natural disasters like tornado or some other significant national or natural event. So it's best to make those available, especially on particularly short notice. In other words, if a tornado is going through town, immediate action has to be taken, that evening. So the ordinance contemplates a wide range of emergency situations. What's important to recognize that our ordinance requires all these actions to be ratified by this entire City Council in short order. Many alternatives outlined in the ordinance are geared toward the notion of the potential for social distancing. For instance, possibility that council members may need to participate in council meetings electronically rather than in person. And this is consistent with actions taken by the university, other public entities, and private entities, including, I read this morning, churches in the community. The idea behind all these instances is to place some distance between individuals where there's a possibility of exposure of members of the public to carriers of the virus. The ordinance does not provide any new or additional powers that are not already in existence for the mayor in the city code. And as I said before, they've been in the city code for many years now. Whether any of these steps will be necessary, other than the cancellation of some meetings and the necessity to deal with personnel issues, including work-at-home issues, and the ability to respond to needs of our fire and police departments is not completely known at this time. It may be necessary for the city to make emergency purchases as well. This is provided in the city code already. It may be necessary to close certain city facilities or extend payments required by persons owing money to the city. These matters, while not specifically set forth in the city code currently, just provide additional flexibility to act without additional council action. So I'll review the specifics of the ordinance now, and then if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. So I'll go to the ordinance now as it's before you. So the ordinance is authorized and patterned, I'm going to speak generally again, based on the State Emergency Management Agency Act. Again, this is a statute that's been on the books for a long time. It's nothing new, and this is what the governor acted pursuant to. When preparing this ordinance and the emergency declaration that the mayor eventually executed, I reviewed emergency declarations from a number of other communities. This is not unique. In other words, Champaign is not unique in issuing a local declaration of emergency, just as many states have also done this too. The governor indicated in his press release connected with the declaration of emergency that it was meant to provide potential access to other resources, and so does this contemplate that when the mayor declares an emergency, it provides potential access to other state or federal resources. I want to emphasize the word may. This is what is typically required, though, when the state or the federal government is contemplating giving resources to community. This is required when we've declared emergencies in prior years relative to tornadoes or the ice storm going further back. So this is just a context for the ordinance. Our ordinance structure contemplates some immediate action by the mayor, in this instance declaring an emergency. There are no additional powers that the mayor has exercised right now under that emergency declaration. It contemplates, the ordinance as it exists now and as we're dealing with it, contemplates the immediate action by the mayor to declare emergency, but then also contemplates review by the city council. Any actions that the mayor takes are ultimately reviewable by the city council in short order. The ordinance requires the attempt to convene the city council within 24 hours. This was done in this instance, that's why there's a short notice, and also provides some limitation on the mayor's exercise of some of these other actions identified in the ordinance. They can only last a maximum of a week. So it contemplates immediate action, but always ratification by the city council. I'd like to go through the ordinance now in a straightforward way, starting with the whereas clauses, because I think they're important. What it does is recognize that all facets of the World Health apparatus, including the World Health Organization, the state or the United States Health and Human Services Secretary, the governor, at all levels they've declared a healthcare emergency. The WHO issued a statement recently declaring the COVID-19 virus to be a pandemic. But this of course has been widely reported in the media, and I've attached some of the statements and the declarations to the report that accompanied the council bill. I want to go down to the very last whereas. It says, whereas the mayor has issued a declaration of emergency pursuant to 12-37 of the municipal code. Some people say, I've heard some people talk about whether there is an emergency in the community or not. But our ordinance and most emergency pieces of legislation say that it's in existence or reasonably anticipated. And that's an important concept to recognize. You don't have to wait for the train to run over you before you get out of the way. It's important that this is an effort to get ahead of this rather than wait till after there is a worse situation in the community. That's what our emergency ordinance contemplates, and that's what state statutes and certainly the governor's declaration did too. As I said before, we've been acting under the authorization of the State Emergency Agency Management Act, our own ordinances, and we're a home rule unit under the Constitution. That's the whereas clauses. In the meat of the ordinance, I'll go through them section by section. Section 1 contemplates city council meetings, and everybody's familiar with the concept of people being exposed and then having to self-isolate. This section contemplates at least the possibility of that happening. It doesn't require meetings to be conducted in any other way that we usually conduct meetings, but it anticipates the eventuality of that and allows those to be conducted electronically. And we've been talking with our IT folks about how that could best be accomplished to accommodate non-in-person meetings, in other words, meetings over computer hookups or telephonic hookups, but trying to also make those available for streaming so they're available in an instantaneous way to the community, and also hopefully to provide some opportunity for the public to participate as well. This is all part of what IT has been looking at. But what this does is that it allows for that possibility, all of that possibility. It doesn't require it, doesn't mandate it, but it allows the city council to meet in that fashion. Section 2 also contemplates the notion that the meetings of boards and commissions under city auspices might be canceled, but it also provides for the extension of any deadline, so people who need to have things approved within a certain deadline aren't penalized because of that. It allows for that flexibility to act under Section 2. Section 3 talks about licenses or permitted activities. The city licenses a narrow range, really, of activities in the city, but it licenses things like special events that have the potential to draw larger crowds, and the best public health information says to discourage those, and if it's in the city's power to suspend those type of licenses, and if there's a reasonable opportunity that those will be detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare of the community, the mayor, on the recommendation of the city manager, is authorized to suspend licenses for events or other potential licenses or permits that have the potential to be detrimental to public health and safety. It's hard to anticipate every instance where that may be required, and there is no compulsion to do that, certainly. So on a case-by-case basis, one might have to do that. If somebody had, for instance, a license for a special event, anticipating to draw hundreds and hundreds of people, well, it might be the wisest decision to either not grant or suspend a license if it had already been issued. Again, it would have to be something that was contemplated viewing the individual circumstances. Nothing compels that type of action. in this ordinance. There's Section 4 talks about emergency purchases. There's actually emergency purchasing authority in the city code now. This simply underscores that and talks about the need, the possible need, again, to make purchases immediately without going through all the formalities in the purchasing ordinance. An ordinary purchase under the purchasing ordinance would take days or weeks to accomplish. This contemplates a shorter time span if that becomes necessary. But again, this is already power that's within the ordinance. It emphasizes it perhaps and underscores the ability to do that. Personnel policies are in Section 5, and it provides the city manager authority to adjust personnel policies related to leave time, other benefits, or terms and conditions of employment geared toward the safety of the staff, the contemplation of possible work-at-home issues, other flexibility that may be required to exercise that aren't contained in our current personnel policies that have been approved by the City Council or our labor agreements. And that gets to Section 6, which talks about the possibility of coming to understandings with our bargaining units over certain aspects of work life. This was done before. In, I want to say 2009, when there was N1 N1 health emergency. Section 7 talks about city facilities. The city manager authorized to close certain city facilities to protect the health of the public and employees of the city. There is this power now in the city code. This, again, underscores the ability of the city manager and other managers of facilities to close and to do things that are not, usually we're given tours of buildings, we're promoting tours of buildings. So this contemplates the fact that we're probably not going to be doing any tours in the next couple of weeks of our facilities. Ordinance violations is number 8. It gives the city attorney the authority to extend timeframes for the payment of fines and the filing of city ordinance violations. I have some of this authority now under the existing ordinances. This again underscores this and makes it more visible perhaps to the public during this period of time. Section 9 talks about amounts due to the city, and it authorizes the city manager on the recommendation of the finance director to extend deadlines for payment relating to debts owing to the city. Again, it contemplates the fact that maybe people won't be able to interact directly with staff as it does sometimes. Many of our payments can be done online, so this but it's possible that there may be situations that need to be extended, and this just simply gives the flexibility. It doesn't require it, but it gives flexibility to the city manager and finance director to do that. Section 10 is sort of a catch-all, I want to say, and this refers back to the powers, the other powers that are contained in the city code. Again, there's nothing that compels the exercise of any of these powers, and they're extensive. There's no doubt about it. You look at these and you say, holy cow, the mayor can confiscate property. Hopefully that's never going to be required, but I did just read in California where there was a necessity to take over a hotel. They tried to buy the hotel, but the necessity to actually take possession of that to isolate people during the quarantine. Now this isn't, this is a pretty extreme case, but it's possible, and it may be required to be done and in a more immediate fashion. All these actions, though, are for short term, I want to emphasize, and all have to be ratified by the City Council as a whole. And again, it contemplates action within 48 hours by the mayor, an attempt to meet with the city council within 24 hours. So these are very short-term possibilities. But they're already in the city code. There's nothing new that we've added to these list of powers. And they parrot the powers that the State Emergency Management Act already provides for state action. The governor could do these things right now. And these have been in the city code for many years, as I said. There's a provision for absence or incapacity of the mayor or the city manager. These are all already more or less provided for in the city code. This underscores this for the public and this emergency action. The duration is for 28 days, continues for serial 28-day periods. Presumably the city council will have met during those periods of time. And again, it can only be acted upon after if the city council hasn't already repealed these. Could be repealed earlier, it could be extended depending on the circumstances in the community. That summarizes what I have to say about it. I'll again call your attention to the attachments to the report, which are from the World Health Organization, the United States Secretary of Health and Human Services, and the governor's proclamation.
City Manager, did you have items to add as well?
Some of the things that Fred has gone over that the ordinance provides for are things that in the practical operation of our day-to-day business are necessary. And, you know, I issued a statement to all employees yesterday that as of earlier this week, we directed our whole executive management team to refocus the whole organization on emergency preparedness activities. And some of the things that our departments are going through in preparing are things like what happens as our workforce gets ill. And that's a very real possibility, particularly when you consider our first responder resources. So our fire department, our police department, we serve as the lead agency of METCAD 911 on behalf of all the agencies in the county. When we start to see employees taking ill, and we are unable perhaps to meet the minimum staffing to continue those essential services, I need to be empowered to act quickly. And we have collective bargaining agreements with our employee unions. I have to be empowered to be able to sit down with our union leadership and negotiate memorandums of understanding of how we might operate. A very practical thing may be, you know, working conditions are defined by contract between the city and our unions. If we need to change shift scheduling, for example, because given the number of people who are healthy and able to work, we can't cover shifts, so we have to go from 10-hour shifts to 12-hour shifts. Ordinarily, those kinds of things are negotiated in a bargaining agreement. Those things are brought before council. But in urgency, on a very practical level, I may need the authority to sit down with bargaining unit leadership, reach a memorandum of understanding, put that in place, and then notify the city council that I've done it, because the time involved in scheduling the city council meeting could be very precious time that inhibits our ability to maintain the critical frontline services. And I think that's important for the public to consider, that much of this is very oriented to the operation of our organization and our administrative and leadership ability to provide direction to the baseline services that you have already authorized in an emergency scenario. And as Fred has already indicated, we could perhaps wait until the point at which I suddenly say, oh my gosh, I'm starting to see firefighters and their families taking ill, and people aren't reporting for work, and we